They say introverts are antisocial, that they hide, that they avoid, that they vanish from the world without warning or apology. But what if I told you, they're not escaping you, they're escaping the structure you built? A structure loud with pretense, inflated with noise, and echoing with hollow performances. You call it society. They experience it as a room that looks open, but whose walls close in the moment they speak honestly. It's not that introverts dislike people. They dislike pretending to be people they're not. And in this carefully staged world, where connection is currency and presence is performance, every interaction becomes a negotiation of self, a theater where authenticity is punished and superficiality is rewarded. For the introvert, the toll becomes unbearable, so they build another room, a quieter one without spotlights, one where silence isn't awkward, it's sacred. You see, this room is not built out of fear, it is constructed from clarity, the clarity that comes when a person has seen too much of the artificial and tasted too little of the real. The introvert's withdrawal is not regression, it's resistance. It's a quiet rebellion against the absurd expectation to be on, all the time, to explain oneself to people committed to misunderstanding them. There is a peculiar cruelty in how the world handles the quiet ones. Their silence is mistaken for judgment, their peace for passivity, their solitude for sadness, but nothing could be further from the truth. Their silence is observation, their peace is discipline, their solitude is self-preservation. The world demands engagement on its own terms, terms that are, more often than not, disfigured by vanity, speed, and noise. To step back is not to give up. It is to choose sanity in a space engineered to exhaust. The irony is, these same people who call introverts distant will never understand how present they actually are, not in the room, not in the noise, but in the layers beneath it. Introverts listen when others speak just to reply. They feel when others mimic empathy. They understand in dimensions most people have never entered. Their distance is not from people, but from pretense. They don't avoid depth. They seek it so desperately, they'd rather be alone than wade in shallow waters disguised as intimacy. What society calls antisocial might just be the refusal to be a pawn in its emotional theater, not because introverts think they're better, but because they've grown tired of explaining their silence, tired of being asked to smile by those who wear theirs like armor, tired of being misread in a language they never agreed to speak. So they sit in their quiet rooms, not in sadness, not in anger, but in sovereignty. And maybe that's the part that frightens you most, not that they've left the room, but that they never really needed it to begin with. True solitude isn't isolation, it's liberation. People don't realize how much of daily life is theater, not drama asterisk theater asterisk, an orchestrated ritual of greetings, smiles, rehearsed interest, and polite nods in all the right places, a social choreography, a mutual agreement to say the right things at the right time in the right tone. And introverts at some point simply begin to ask, why? Why are we all performing? Why do we pretend we're connected when most conversations feel like echoes bouncing off walls no one really built to last? It's not that introverts hate people. It's that they begin to see the absurdity in the performance, the smiling while silently unraveling, the laughing while longing to disappear, the clinking glasses while no one listens. Society has become a stage play where depth is off script. Everyone knows their lines, but no one believes in the story anymore. What happens, then, when someone refuses the role? They become suspicious. Distant, cold. They're accused of being difficult, unfriendly, or even broken. But they're none of these things. They've just realized that playing along comes at a cost, and they're no longer willing to pay it. This isn't rebellion for the sake of rebellion. This is survival. Emotional, psychological survival, because forced interaction is its own kind of imprisonment. The introvert sees it clearly. People aren't engaging, they're projecting. They're not talking, they're performing talking. Listening has become a prop, attention a commodity, vulnerability an act of recklessness in a world that sells your sincerity back to you as content. There is something tragic in this, something quietly monstrous, and yet we pretend it's normal. We put on the costume every morning, I'm fine. We enter the stage, how are you? We bow at the right moments, take care. But nothing really happens. No one touches, no one is touched. Introverts, by their very nature, hunger for what's real, and when they can't find it in the spectacle, they stop showing up. They don't make a scene, they don't slam the door. They just start letting calls go unanswered. Start saying no to gatherings that feel more like auditions than human connection. Start building a life outside the spotlight. A life where presence doesn't need to be loud to be profound. And this choice, this refusal to perform isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's not that they can't be social. It's that they refuse to be artificially social. And in a world intoxicated by image, that's a radical act. What introverts understand in ways others often forget is that meaning cannot be mass-produced, intimacy cannot be scheduled, and the soul cannot breathe in fluorescent rooms where everyone's smiling just a little too much. They're not antisocial, they're just done with the masquerade. Asterisk asterisk, when the play ends and the masks fall, the quiet ones will be the only ones who still remember their own face. Asterisk asterisk, there's a toll to existing in a world that never stops talking. And introverts pay that toll with interest. Every casual conversation, every shallow exchange, every how's the weather, and what do you do, it adds up. Not because these questions are inherently offensive, but because they demand energy without offering meaning. Imagine going to a well to draw water and finding only dust. Now imagine doing that every day, multiple times, while pretending you're quenched. People often mistake introverts for fragile or overly sensitive, as if their withdrawal is a form of retreat. But it's not fragility, it's calculation. It's exhaustion masquerading as detachment. They aren't rude when they go silent after your third anecdote about weekend plans. They're depleted. You've withdrawn from their emotional account, and society expects them to overdraft with a smile. This is the tax of shallow interactions. They're not small because they're short. They're small because they leave no imprint. The introvert walks away emptier than before, and what's worse, they're expected to enjoy it. To call this connection, to accept it as normal. But there is nothing normal about pouring yourself into conversations that evaporate the moment you step away. There's a quiet despair that comes from being surrounded by people who speak fluently in surfaces. And yet, this is the language most social settings require. Keep it light, keep it moving, don't dig too deep. You might disturb the illusion. You might awaken something we've all agreed to keep asleep. The introvert doesn't just sense this. They feel it in their bones. They know when they're being invited into a space, not for who they are, but for how well they can conform to the expected script. It's not that they don't want to engage. They simply long for something true, something that doesn't feel like theater, something that doesn't end with both parties forgetting it happened. But those conversations, real, messy, layered, are rare. And so, the introvert conserves their energy the way a traveler does in a barren land, not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. And here lies the deeper truth. Introverts are not socially deficient. They are socially discriminating. They're not incapable of interaction. They're unwilling to dilute it. Every forced smile, every pretend laugh, every nod at something they internally resist. It chips away at the integrity they hold dear. You may not notice it, you may even call them aloof, but they are bleeding under the surface, lowly, quietly. So, when you see them withdraw, don't assume it's because they don't care. It's often because they care too much to keep faking it. They would rather say nothing than say something untrue. They would rather be alone than become a hollow version of themselves in the company of others. To crave depth in a world drowning in surfaces is not dysfunction, it is discernment. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? We've never been more connected, yet never more estranged. Notifications chirp like birds in the morning, reminders that someone, somewhere, has acknowledged your digital existence, but acknowledgement is not intimacy. A like is not understanding, a comment is not presence. The introvert sees this for what it is, a performance of closeness, a simulation, a clever architecture where attention replaces affection and validation is measured in metrics. The myth of connectivity is one of the most persistent illusions of our time. We confuse access with relationship. Just because someone can reach you doesn't mean they no you. Just because you're visible doesn't mean you're seen . And the introvert who hungers for meaning begins to starve in this endless scroll of empty signals. It's not that they dislike connection. They distrust counterfeit connection. Digital life offers the promise of companionship without the vulnerability of closeness. You can broadcast without listening. You can reply without thinking. You can vanish without consequence. For many, this is convenience. For the introvert, it's contamination, because their nature is rooted in substance. In slowness, in the unspoken spaces between words, they don't seek more communication, they seek communion not more voices, but one that resonates, but try to find resonance in a timeline, try to find silence in a feed. The moment you pause, the algorithm drags you back into motion. This isn't communication, it's consumption. The introvert knows this. They feel the fatigue of performing availability, the strain of responding for the sake of appearances. They tire of being part of a system that confuses presence with presence, online . And so they retreat, not to disappear, but to reappear in a space that still makes sense. It's easy to label this withdrawal as antisocial. But it's not rejection, it's reorientation, a refusal to participate in rituals that feel hollow, a conscious choice to step away from the noise and preserve what little still feels sacred. And sometimes silence is the only honest reply to a world that won't stop talking. What most don't realize is how deep the disconnect really is. We walk through crowds of avatars, not people. We project, not perceive. The introvert sees this schism, not because they're cynical, but because they're awake . And that awareness hurts. It's the kind of pain that doesn't scream, it hums. A quiet ache that grows louder with every empty ping. You might ask, then what do they want? The answer is deceptively simple, a moment that's real. A conversation that lingers, a connection that doesn't vanish once the screen goes dark. They want humanity, not hyperactivity, substance, not spectacle, so they step back, they go quiet, not because they don't care, but because they care too much to fake it. Their silence is not disengagement, it's a protest, and their solitude is not loneliness, it's clarity. Connection without truth is just noise. And some souls would rather hear nothing than lie to themselves just to feel heard. There's a quiet kind of reverence that lives inside the mind of an introvert. Not pride, not isolation, but sanctuary. In a culture obsessed with external validation, visibility, popularity, performance, the introvert dares to turn inward. While others broadcast their lives in pixels and approval counts, the introvert descends deeper into the self. Not to hide, but to breathe, because the modern world with its constant stimuli has become spiritually claustrophobic. It's curious how society treats inner space. Suspicion cloaks the quiet. People who don't constantly speak, share, or participate are treated like anomalies. But the introvert knows something many have forgotten. The mind, when cultivated, is not a prison. It's a cathedral. A vast, echoing, intricate sanctuary where thoughts can stretch, ideas can rest, and silence can finally speak. The world moves quickly, the mind does not, and in that slowness the introvert finds depth, something the surface world increasingly abandons. But this devotion to inner space is not without cost. In a hyper-social age, presence is demanded. Not your true presence, but a facsimile. Your highlight reel, your curated enthusiasm, your performative availability. To step away from that is to commit a kind of social heresy. You're labeled out of touch, arrogant, even broken. But what if the opposite is true? What if the people who can't be alone are the ones afraid of what they'll find when the noise stops? Introverts don't fear solitude. They honor it. Not because it's easier, but because it's more honest. It doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't ask for applause. It simply reflects, and sometimes that reflection is painful. That's the risk, but it's also the cure. You begin to understand yourself without distortion. You begin to hear your own voice again, something many people lose in the blur of expectations. In solitude, the introvert finds not detachment but refinement, not escape but expansion. They aren't retreating from the world, they're resetting their alignment with it. They emerge from silence clearer, sharper, more whole. And yet, when they return, they're met with suspicion. Why were you quiet? What's wrong? Are you okay? As if quiet were an illness, as if introspection were a defect. But how can you expect someone to speak authentically if they're never allowed the time to think? This is the cruel paradox. Society worships productivity but fears reflection. It celebrates voices but punishes depth. The introvert walks this contradiction every day, valuing what the world overlooks and questioning what it demands. They aren't antisocial, they're anti-fragmentation. They refuse to be stretched so thin that their core self disappears. The mind, for them, is not a place of exile. It's home, a sacred refuge in a world of constant departure. And while others may chase the next notification, the next distraction, the next applause, the introvert chooses stillness, not because it's easier, but because it's real. Those who live in their mind may walk alone, but they walk in rooms most will never even know exist. There's a misconception that silence is passive. That retreat means surrender, that someone who walks away has somehow lost, but the truth is quieter and far more unsettling. When an introvert withdraws, it's not because they've been defeated. It's because they've seen too clearly, felt too deeply, and decided with calm certainty that the performance is no longer worth the cost. That is not collapse. That is rebellion. A quiet rebellion that doesn't seek to destroy, but refuses to participate. In a society where volume is mistaken for truth and visibility for worth, choosing silence is heretical. But this is exactly what introverts do. They say no, not loudly, not cruelly, but unmistakably. A boundary drawn not in anger, but in weariness, a soft resistance to the erosion of the self. They don't storm out. They simply stop showing up to places where their presence has been reduced to decoration. The world, addicted to immediacy, cannot understand this. It needs you to respond, to engage, to validate its rituals. So when you don't, when you opt out, it panics. It calls you cold, distant, antisocial. But none of that is true. The introvert doesn't reject connection. They reject the conditions placed upon it, the games, the noise, the performance of sincerity. They are not without feeling. They are simply done bleeding into conversations that never deserved their honesty in the first place. It's important to understand this disconnection is not disinterest, it's discernment. It's the refusal to pretend that everything is fine when it's hollow. It's the courage to say no more, even when that means standing alone. And that solitude, it is not exile, it is chosen, it is inhabited, it is filled with integrity, a kind of spiritual perimeter where truth can still breathe. There's a certain strength that only grows in silence. Not the kind that flexes, but the kind that asterisk endures. Asterisk that doesn't ask to be seen, that doesn't need to be explained. The introvert isn't trying to escape life. They're trying to live it on terms that don't fracture their spirit. And that's not avoidance, that's resistance. A resistance that is deeply internal, but no less radical. You see, in a world of compulsive sharing, being private is provocative. In a culture of overstimulation, being still is rebellious. In an economy of attention, refusing to perform is revolutionary. The introvert embodies all of this, not as a strategy, but as instinct. They are not avoiding you. They are surviving the version of the world that demands they be someone else. So if you find them distant, ask yourself, what are they actually distancing themselves asterisk from asterisk? Most likely it's the theater, the noise, the conditional love, the unspoken rule that says, you must be available at all times in all ways to be accepted. That's not connection, that's captivity, and they would rather walk alone than live that way. Asterisk asterisk, the quiet ones are not hiding. They're healing in the one place still untouched by pretense, their solitude. Asterisk asterisk.